And another one gone, and another one gone, another Wildberries warehouse bites the dust. Ukraine just keeps on unleashing its drones, and there is nothing that can stop them from erasing the irreplaceable. Sure, warehouses can be rebuilt, but can the trust in Wildberries, can the billions of dollars the company and its customers are losing be replaced? No. None of that is coming back. And we can say the same for everything that was in the warehouse. A giant fireball has just engulfed another Wildberries facility, and the woes of a company that pretended not to be involved in Putin's invasion just keep on coming. In late 2025, Wildberries, which is an e-commerce platform akin to Amazon, opened up a new facility in the Voronezh region. This warehouse was the new pride and joy of a company that has gone from strength to strength during the war in Ukraine. Spanning 152,900 square meters and with a capacity of up to 90 million items, the warehouse quickly became a vital link in the massive logistical supply chain that Wildberries has set up in mainland Russia. Millions of purchases have already been made, thousands of vendors relied on the warehouse for their businesses, and tens of thousands of customers made purchases on Wildberries that circulated through Voronezh before finding their way to whoever handed over the cash. That warehouse has existed for less than a year. Now a huge chunk of it is gone. Erased off the map, never to come back. On August 11th, the Kyiv Post reported that Ukraine's drone operators had carried out a drone strike against Wildberries' new Voronezh warehouses, sparking a massive fire. A little under a quarter of the facility was engulfed, as flames spread to 36,000 square meters of warehouse space before firefighters were able to quell the blaze. Along with the warehouse space, Wildberries lost untold thousands, perhaps even millions, of products that its sellers were relying on it to protect and its buyers were likely waiting to receive. The regional governor of Voronezh, Alexander Gusev, confirmed the strike in a Telegram post. Well, sort of. Announcing that Ukraine has unleashed a wave of 15 drones on the oblast he oversees, Gusev tried to be as vague as he possibly could, likely in a desperate attempt to hide the fact that Ukraine has pulled off yet another successful strike against Russia's version of Amazon. Falling UAV debris ignited fires at two warehouses belonging to a major company. At one facility, the fire has been contained to an area of 16,000 square meters, while firefighters are battling a blaze covering 20,000 square meters at the other, Gusev revealed. That's an interesting detail. It seems that the fire at the Wildberries Voronezh facility occurred in two locations, suggesting that at least two of Ukraine's drones managed to break through Russia's air defenses. That's humiliating. It tells us that whatever defenses might exist in Voronezh aren't capable of protecting the entire warehouse. Oh, and before we forget, Gusev delivered an old reliable, the favored Russian excuse. It wasn't Ukraine's drones that did the damage. It was debris from those drones that just so happened to land exactly where Ukraine wanted it to land after Russia's heroic air defenses took them out. Complete nonsense, of course. You don't end up with a fire big enough to engulf 6 football fields because of a few scraps of drone debris. You get that sort of fire when the drone scores direct hits, unleashing their explosive fury all over the target. Beyond failing to give Ukraine's drones the credit they deserve, Gusev tried to cover up the target by only vaguely referring to two warehouses rather than Wildberries. Whatever concealment was going on didn't last long. Both Ukraine and Wildberries itself have confirmed that it was indeed the Wildberries Voronezh facility that was the latest victim of Ukraine's long-range sanctions. The company's logistics facilities in the Voronezh region have been evacuated in accordance with safety requirements, Wildberries said in an official press statement published on Telegram. An evacuation isn't needed unless your warehouse is on fire. Wildberries later went on to confirm that firefighters were on the scene, and it claimed that most of the goods stored in the Voronezh facility were undamaged. We suppose that's technically true. Ukraine took out about 25% of the facility, so 75% of the goods survived because they weren't hit. The rest are on fire. And if we know Ukraine, it seems likely that a follow-up strike is coming to claim more. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Brovdy, was a little more ebullient when he confirmed that Ukraine had pulled a DJ Khalid and scored another one. The last package has left the chat. The irony of the fate of the SVO Quartermaster, highly flammable kinetic sand, was delivered as the last package by the freedom-loving Ukrainian bird to Wildberries' brand new logistics hub in Voronezh. It burned down at work, Brovdy declared. He has such a way with words. And if any more doubt could possibly remain after all of that, it was easily put to bed when the footage started emerging. The flames and massive plumes of smoke have been caught in several videos showcasing the sheer scale of Ukraine's strike. Xelanova Plus even has a video with footage shot from multiple angles, showcasing the massive fire that burned through the night. We'll say it again, that doesn't happen due to drone debris, Gusev. Nobody is buying Russia's lies on that one. Ukraine is picking the Wildberries piece by piece, and it scored a huge hit on the night of August 10th and into 11th. It cost Russia $120 million to build the Voronezh facility, the Kyiv Post reports. If a quarter of it has just gone up in flames, that suggests a bill of $30 million to bring it back up and running again. Not ideal for a company that's already lost billions to Ukraine's attacks, which we'll get to in a moment. First, and as you might have guessed, Ukraine didn't stop with a single Wildberries warehouse. You rarely see a one-off strike by Ukraine these days. Brovdi reports that Unmanned Systems Forces drones visited 43 different targets over the course of the night. Among them was a Buk M3 air defense system, the destruction of which opens up another gap that Ukraine's drones can exploit in the future. Ukraine also took out energy hubs in Berdyansk and Mariupol, Brovdi declares, along with a dry cargo vessel that was being used by the Russian Shadow Fleet operating in the Black Sea. Military and energy facilities were also hit in Crimea, continuing Ukraine's campaign of isolating the peninsula. And there's one more thing. Oh yes, another of Russia's oil refineries was hit by Ukraine's drones. As the Wildberries warehouses in Voronezh burned, the same thing was happening at the Orsknefteorgsintez in Russia's Orenburg region. Located about 1,500 kilometers away from the front lines, that refinery is one of the largest in the region, and according to Ukraine, is an important enterprise in Russia's fuel and energy sector. We can see how important from the numbers that the New Voice of Ukraine shares. The Orsknefteorgsintez isn't one of Russia's largest refineries, but that doesn't mean the facility is small. It has a refining capacity of about 6 million tons of crude oil per year, which it turns into a range of products including fuel oil, bitumen, and aviation fuel. The scale of the damage done to the refinery is still being assessed, though Ukraine's general staff has reported that the attack caused a fire. So that's another refinery hit. It looks like Ukraine isn't showing any signs of slowing down on these types of strikes following a first half of 2026 that saw its drones find their refinery targets at least 194 times. Perhaps the goal of the second half of the year is to crack 200 strikes in 6 months, and Orsknefteorgsintez is just another victim. Still, it's yet another Wildberries warehouse being reduced to ash that is the headline grabber from the night's strikes. Once again, Ukraine's drones have found their marks, and again it seems as though Russia simply doesn't have the air defenses needed to protect its largest e-commerce platform. The lack of defenses matters. Why? The simple answer is that losing Wildberries will wreak havoc on the Russian economy. But before we dig a lot deeper into that and what Ukraine wants to achieve with these strikes, this is a reminder that you're watching the Military Show. We bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. If you want to see more in-depth analysis like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. Anybody who has been keeping up with what Ukraine has done with its long-range sanctions over the last few weeks will know that the Voronezh facility that Ukraine has hit is far from the first Wildberries asset to be targeted. In fact, it's a long way down the list. By August 3rd, Ukraine had already struck 14 Wildberries warehouses during a 17-day campaign that is believed to have cost the company 1.5 million square meters of the 5.6 million square meters of warehouse space that it maintains. That's according to the Russian outlet Vestka, which also points out that Ukraine started this campaign with a bang. It targeted the Wildberries warehouse at Elektrostal, which is in the Moscow region, scoring a double blow in the process. Not only did the 250,000 square meter facility completely burn down, but Ukraine sent a message to Putin that its drones can carry out strikes even in the most well-defended region of Russia. More strikes followed. 8 of them saw Ukraine strike warehouses that were more than 100,000 square meters in size, including facilities in Vladimir, Ryazan, Samara, Pensa, Tambov, Stavropol, Krasnodar, and St. Petersburg. You can now add Voronezh to the list. Ukraine has also struck 5 smaller Wildberries warehouses by August 3rd, showing the company that Ukraine wouldn't hold back against the seemingly less important facilities that it manages. A strike had even been attempted in Voronezh already, though Ukraine's drones only managed to damage a roof. This time around, Ukraine made its attack count. The financial losses from this series of strikes have been massive. According to The Bell, losses from the destruction of warehouses were already estimated to be more than $3 billion, and there have only been more since. Sellers have borne the brunt of these losses, though Wildberries obviously loses the cut it gets from each product sale when those products are burnt to a crisp. The Bell says that Wildberries sells about 10% of its merchandise directly, with the other 90% being purchased by vendors who then sell it to consumers via the Wildberries platform. Those vendors aren't having much luck getting their money back from Wildberries. The company has said several times that it's not obligated to compensate its vendors for any losses they experience due to Ukraine's drone strikes. Interestingly, there is even a hint that Wildberries anticipated something like this happening and prepared for it just ahead of Ukraine beginning its campaign against the company's warehouses. On July 1st, the Moscow Times reported that the company had updated its vendor partnership agreement to remove any financial liability it once had for goods that are lost or damaged due to missile strikes, drone assaults, or civil unrest. That new agreement came into force on July 7th, along with another new rule that saw it raise merchant commission fees to 20% across some product lines. Wildberries explained that decision in an accompanying statement saying, "The current economic situation, particularly the significant rise in fuel prices and the resulting increase in logistics costs, directly affects operational expenses." However, the timing of all this is very suspicious. It was only a couple of weeks after these updates were made that Ukraine's drones started to rain down. If we had a mind for conspiracy theories, we'd suggest that Wildberries knew that something was coming, likely due to its connections to the Kremlin and the intelligence such connections provide. So Wildberries did away with any compensation liability that it had and tried to milk as much cash out of its vendors as it could before all of its warehouses started to crumble. Now, no vendor is getting their money back for the products that they've lost. That may protect Wildberries from more immediate financial pain, but it's not exactly a great long-term strategy. Angry vendors who have lost thousands of dollars of products in the warehouse fires aren't likely to trust Wildberries with their business endeavors in the future. The company could be setting itself up for major problems in the future, assuming that it's even capable of making it out of Ukraine's blitz in one piece. For Ukraine, creating that anger is the entire point, and it's not just in terms of that anger being directed at Wildberries. Ukraine has bigger fish to fry, and it hopes that its Wildberries attack will help it to get that particular fish into the pan. Before we explain more, there's also the impact on Russia's economy to consider. The attack on Wildberries' Voronezh facility is just the latest in a series of strikes impacting a company that contributes a huge amount to Russia's economy. Along with its main competitor Ozon and other online retail platforms, Wildberries accounts for 8.5% of Russia's gross domestic product. As the largest of these retailers, Wildberries has the most pronounced impact. The e-commerce sector in Russia also provides around 4 million jobs, The Week reports. That means it accounts for about 5% of Russia's total workforce, and again, Wildberries lies at the heart of it all. Between the jobs it offers directly and the vast amount of supporting work needed to keep goods moving, products being made, and everything else, Wildberries has a hand in the livelihoods of millions of Russian people. Now imagine that Wildberries goes away. The economic shockwaves would ripple from all over Russia, and the Kremlin knows it just as well as Ukraine. Wildberries is considered central to plans for economic growth, The Week reports, to the point where the Russian government has already bought a 5% stake in the company. Now it's about to step in to do whatever it can to save Wildberries. In an August 6th report, the New Voice of Ukraine said that the Russian state will almost be forced to step in to save the company, per a pair of unnamed e-commerce market sources inside Russia. A multi-billion-dollar bailout would be needed, and that figure will only rise if Ukraine continues to strike Wildberries' warehouses and logistical hubs. And behind all of this are the merchants, the people who are losing products and not getting paid for what they do manage to sell. The same outlet points out that Wildberries typically pays its sellers within 3 weeks of their products being sold. The delays are happening as the company deals with a cash crunch caused by Ukraine's attacks. 3 weeks has become 3 months. A cascading crisis emerges. Not only are sellers not getting compensated for lost products, but they're also having to deal with the money coming in far later than anticipated. For vendors with tight margins, which will account for thousands who sell cheap products, these delays could spell the end for their small businesses. And the more small businesses that crumble, the fewer vendors that Wildberries has, leading to the company making less money, which in turn leads to more delays. It's a vicious cycle of Ukraine's making, and it seems unlikely that even a bailout could save the company now. After all, Ukraine is always building more drones, and there will be plenty still waiting, with visits to more Wildberries warehouses scheduled. If you're wondering how Ukraine justifies its attacks on what is supposed to be a civilian company, this economic pain is a large part of the reasoning. Plus, there's the whole issue of Wildberries selling drone components and military gear, to the point where it even had dedicated product tags for gear intended for soldiers taking part in Putin's special military operation. This company is far from innocent when it comes to the Ukraine war. It's complicit in making that war possible through what it sells and the money that it pumps into Putin's war coffers. But the real problem for Russia is this. Ukraine is making the Russian people feel the consequences of the war their leader started in a way that nobody expected. It turned out to be a sensitive censor of the comfort of Russia's massive population, people who consider themselves completely untouched by the actions of the aggressor country, Brovdi said of the Wildberries strikes in an interview with AP News. That's an unusually understated way of talking about what Ukraine is doing from a man who is known for his enthusiasm, but it gets the point across. Even the refinery strikes that Ukraine has been conducting don't affect the Russian people as widely, and certainly not as immediately, as Wildberries warehouses burning all over the country. The people of Voronezh and the surrounding regions will now feel that pain, just as those who relied on the more than a dozen warehouses that Ukraine had already hit are feeling it. Wildberries is at the center of Russian life, again, much the same way that Amazon is central to life in the West. It's where Russians go to order almost anything they buy online, including products that are hard for them to source due to Western sanctions. All of that is disappearing now, and that puts pressure on Putin to find a solution. The anger we spoke about earlier will become fear, and all of these negative emotions will be sent in Putin's direction. At least that's what Ukraine hopes. Ultimately, what we've just seen in Voronezh is part of a much wider campaign to bring the war back to Russia to such an extent that Putin's own people start to rebel. Ukraine believes that approach will eventually bring Putin back to the table, not because he wants to be there, because he has no choice. As immediate as the impact of these strikes has been on Russia, Putin is responding to the pressure with escalation. That's what he usually does, and it's a sign that Russia's leader is getting desperate. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed on August 10th that Russia is resorting to literally snatching people off the street to force them into signing up for the Russian army. Zelensky also claims that Russia is buying large quantities of North Korean military equipment, likely for a stronger push against Ukraine. Every step Russia takes, increasing ballistic missile production, bringing in North Korean equipment, preparing for mobilization, all of this shows that Moscow is preparing not for peace, but for escalation. And the world needs to respond now, not wait, Zelensky declares. He isn't wrong. Putin's plan may be to throw everything that Russia has into winning the Ukraine war so that he doesn't have to negotiate a peace deal. Ukraine's response will be more of the same. Attacks against Wildberries and other key cogs of the Russian war machine just keep piling on the pressure. As long as Ukraine can sustain its defense at home, it can ruin Putin domestically. Voronezh was just the latest target. We're willing to bet that more of Wildberries' warehouses will be introduced to the hellfire caused by Ukraine's drones sooner rather than later. If Putin is to be forced into peace negotiations, pressure from Ukraine alone may not be enough to do it. Help from Ukraine's allies is needed. And in the US, Ukraine has an ally that has just taken a massive step toward applying that pressure. America just did the one thing that Russia fears, and you can find out what that is by watching our video. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show so you don't miss any of our analysis of Ukraine's latest strikes on Russian territory. And thank you for watching.